Our next reader is Laura Godfrey. Laura Godfrey is Assistant Chair of the Department of English and Humanities at North Idaho College. She has published widely on American literature and on Hemingway in both journals and edited book collections. Her book, Hemingway's Geographies, Intimacy, Materiality, and Memory, is forthcoming in May 2016 from Paul Grave Macmillan. Laura Godfrey will also be presenting at our academic panel at the University of Idaho on Friday in the Whitewater Room from 1:30 until 3. It's Hemingway and his scholars, so I'm very excited to welcome Laura. She joins us from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and she will be reading an excerpt from Where the Lumber Mill Was. Please join me in welcoming Laura.
Thank you, everyone. It's really exciting to be here, hearing some great writing and all sorts of good things. You're not probably going to need too much context for this piece. It's the first couple of pages of the introduction of the Hemingway book that's coming out in a couple of months. And what I'm describing in it is basically the moment when I realized that I had something to say about Ernest Hemingway. I spent years as an undergraduate in leafy suburban Atlanta, Georgia, reading his writing in countless numbers of classes, but it wasn't until I started studying his work in Idaho that the connections became clear to me. So that's what I'm describing here. Bennewa Creek Road in the panhandle of Idaho is a road I've traveled countless times in my life. Rough, pitted, and studded with rocks too large to be called gravel, it indirectly links US 95 and State Route 5. The road meanders through dense forests of second and third growth stands of Douglas fir, western larch, and white pine, winding by houses and homesteads and the remnants of houses and homesteads. In some cases, nothing of these dwellings remains but patches of cleared meadow, surrounded by mysterious, silent fragments of domestication and habitation, clematis vines, lilac bushes, downed fences, rusted engines, baling wire. I know the names of some of the families who once lived in what are now empty stretches of meadow, and these emptinesses are so prominent in the perception of this landscape that locals still give directions to one another with geographical references like, you go 3 miles past where the Murray place used to be. If you know nothing about this place, you drive the road and very likely you notice the closeness of the trees, the rough contours of the houses, the pervasive road dust in the dry months, the uncomfortable washboard rattling of your vehicle. A person would have few reasons to drive the road unless she lived somewhere along it or knew someone who did. I know Bennewa Creek Road well from having lived there as a child, and I've read about the history of this area and the way it was shaped by Idaho's timber industry. I consider myself a kind of insider here, a native with almost 40 years' worth of acquired place knowledge under my belt. I used to take baths in the creek when my family's cabin had no water. Driving eastward along Bennewa Creek Road, you once would have passed the hulking, empty ruins of the Hodson lumber mill. It has since been torn down. The abandoned mill, when it was still standing, was a remnant of local industry and failed human ambition, sitting on the right side of the road, down a small slope next to Bennewa Creek. The rusted teepee burner and the incline chute that carried waste wood from the mill behind it was a sight so well known to me that I passed by it but rarely gave it any thought at all. I'm old enough to remember the mill when it was running, and to recall seeing smoke rise from the cone-shaped trash burner. Yeah, it took a close reading of Ernest Hemingway's short story, The End of Something, for me to see that I was not looking carefully or thoughtfully enough at this place. I was first assigned The End of Something in a graduate seminar on Hemingway, and afterwards I wrote a short essay on his careful attention to place in that story, describing his focus on the ruins of the Hortons Bay Mill and its function as more than a background on which Nick and Marjorie's drama unfolded. In reading the story, I saw for the first time the way that for Hemingway, these characters' connections to and history in Hortons Bay, Michigan was as central to the story's meaning as was their breakup. It seemed to me that place knowledge was the heart of the story. And I realized that Hemingway's abandoned lumber mill didn't need to symbolize Nick and Marjorie's relationship in order to be important. It was important for what it was, for what it told of this community's history. It spoke of geographical change, of loss, of human failure. The geographies of some of Hemingway's earliest Michigan set stories, in a sense, represent an early foray into his subsequent broader craft of writing by omission. There are absences everywhere in these landscapes, remnants and fragments of human habitation and industry and destruction populate the terrain of these stories. I think of those opening sentences at the end of something. They're written in that quaint, archaic style of someone about to tell a myth or a legend. In the old days, Hemingway writes, Hortons Bay was a lumbering town. Or I think of Nick Adams at the opening of Big Two-Hearted River, seeking out familiar sights amidst the burned and blasted ruins of a place he knew intimately. He looked at the burned-over stretch of hillside where he had expected to find the scattered houses of the town. Or the story The 3-Day Blow, where the second growth timber stands, Hemingway reminds us, like a hedge against the woods behind, which is a subtle yet pressing reminder of the logging industry's impact on that place. In short, Hemingway's textual geographies often set before readers a narrative of land and its history. And for Hemingway, both personally and artistically, the work of remembering what a place used to be is not always pleasant, but it's always necessary. Reading Hemingway's fictional places then changed my perceptions of actual ones. And the very next week after writing that seminar paper, I drove that same stretch of Benoit Creek Road, and I passed the abandoned Hodson Mill, and I began to see what Hemingway had to teach me about places that I'd not been seeing carefully. The geography of the Benoit Valley had once been mute, but reading Hemingway made it speak. Thank you.